Hi, this is Phil Carlton. Thank you for joining me today. If you haven't already, you can go over to YouTube and subscribe to my channel so you'll be notified when I create other videos about Premiere Plus too. You can also find me on Facebook under Premiere Plus Phil. One of the most common questions I get is how to create a layer of stitches that will hold down the nap of fabric like towels or minky when you're embroidering designs or monograms on them. I recently published a course where I taught how to use the Modify module to create a custom-shaped embossing layer. In that course, I also took it a little further and showed how to create an embossed monogram that has an applique border. If you're curious about that course, you can find more information over on my Facebook page, and I'll also include a link to it in the notes for this video on YouTube. There may be times, though, that you just want to create a simple shape to control the fabric nap, and I wanted to demonstrate that today. I'm working in Premiere Plus 2 today, but this technique will work in either Premiere Plus or Premiere Plus 2 embroidery. I've created a monogram, and the first thing I want to do is look over in the design panel and make a note of how large the design is. This one is right under 115 by 41 millimeters, so I'm going to expand those numbers by 4 millimeters, which would give me 119 and 45, and I'm going to remember those dimensions. Now let's create that embossing layer. I'm going to go over to the Wizards tab, and I'm going to use the Quilt Block Wizard for this. And I'm going to come down to the fourth option, which is a filled quilt block with no inner shape. Filled quilt block with no inner shape means that whatever block I define will be filled with the effect I choose. Let's go ahead and set up the size of the block first. I'm going to click Next. And for my shape, I'm going to choose the second shape, which is a rectangle. And I'm going to set my two dimensions to the dimensions that I figured out earlier. So it's going to be a width of 119. I'm going to go to my side B and set my height to 45, and now I've defined a block that's 4 millimeters larger, or 4 millimeters wider and 4 millimeters taller than my monogram. I do have an option here for a cut line. The cut line adds a seam allowance to a quilt block. In this case, I don't need that, so I'm going to uncheck, include a cut line around my quilt block, and click Next. It's going to come in with the default stippling, but we're going to use a crosshatch fill to hold down the nap of the fabric. So I'm going to come down to my third option, which is diamond, square, and crosshatch, and choose the first choice, crosshatch fill. Then I'm going to go to options, and I want this to be a really tight fill, so I'm going to set my gap to 1 millimeter. I'm going to leave the style at diamond, my angle at 45, and a running stitch. I'm going to increase the stitch length just a little bit to 2.5. That's a pretty standard sewing stitch length, and that's going to do a really good job of holding down the nap of that fabric. Then I'm going to click OK. And I can see now I've created that piece that's going to hold down the nap. I'll click Finish. Go to the Home tab, and because I want this to be the first thing that embroiders, I'm going to click Layout Order, Move to Back. And now this is ready to embroider. I do want to talk about one last question that I got, and that is the Remove Overlap. If you go under File and go down to Export, one of our Optimized for Sewing options is Remove Overlap. Remove Overlap, though, looks for a fill on top of a fill. And this design, the stitching in the back, even though it looks like a fill to us, is really made of running stitches. So when the software exports this design, it will not remove those. So you will have a solid layer of that cross-hatching to hold down the nap of the fabric. Thank you so much for joining me today. And as always, I do hope that you've learned something about your software.